Thanks, Lee, for that introduction. So as he indicated, I'm from the Department of Science and Innovation. I apologize. We've just recently had a name change, so you'll still see the old name on the slides. We're still getting an update to our slide deck. So I'm going to give you a bit of an understanding about what our department is currently doing across the various programs within it, and also a little bit about what we are planning to do going forward over the next 10 years. So just to start with, recently in March we had the new white paper on science, technology and innovation approved by Parliament. And the ethos that's within it is that using STI to enable inclusive and sustainable South African development in a changing world. We know there's a lot happening right now around the world in terms of 4IR, which is on everybody's lips. Circular economy is also becoming one of those words or set of words that everybody wants to talk about. And in this white paper, I think it's the first government policy document that actually that speaks about circular economy. In addition, we will be planning sectoral STI plans, and there we're going to look at what government as a whole will decide as the important sectors to pursue for economic growth, and then we'll look at how we develop the STI plans around those. Now, globally, if you look at circular economy and the development thereof, I recently had the privilege to attend the World Circular Economy Forum in Helsinki. And what it highlighted is that the transition needs to be a lot more fairer and a lot more inclusive. So we're always talking about a just transition to a low-carbon economy. From what I've read and seen, it looks like a transition to a circular economy puts us on that path to a just transition as well, because it's a lot more inclusive than the current linear one. And we can see in terms of our GDP growth in this country alone, pursuing that model has led to a much greater Gini coefficient than we would ever have hoped to have seen. And it also puts itself in a position of supporting the SDG outcomes by making a transition. It's also very, very much part of the World Economic Forum agenda and was on the agenda for the recently held WEF Africa in Cape Town as well. However, to succeed in this, you can't do it as a country on your own. You need to work in the region. That's why it was very exciting to see what Ghana had to present on how they're transitioning as well. So we have to work with our neighbors in trying to achieve a circular economy. Two of our key trading partners, being the European Union and China, have already adopted this transition. And China, as far back in 2008, already started to put policies in place around it. The European Union adopted their circular economy package recently, and their action plans associated with that package in 2015. You can see that the EU and China have also actually strengthened cooperation in the area by signing an MOU on circular economy cooperation. Now, in South Africa, we have to look at the global landscape as we're part of the global economy. So if our major trading partners are shifting towards this, what does it mean for us as a country? What are the potential risks to our economic growth and development? But also, what are the opportunities that we can realize by making that shift? And as the DSI, we working with the European Union on a dialogue facility, and we're aiming to have a symposium to discuss how we integrate this into our plans as a DSI over the next 10 years as a framework by which we will address it. So I'm just putting this up. I don't know if it can be seen by everyone, but it's basically there's a lot of different terms thrown around. You've got natural capital, eco-innovation, bioeconomy, reverse logistics, biomimicry, eco-efficiency, industrial symbiosis. There's a lot of terms, and it can get quite confusing. The circular economy addresses quite a few of those terms already, just by trying to make that transition, as was described by my colleague from Ghana, when you look at the butterfly diagram. And what we're doing is we're positioning this within the greening of the economy. So we're still talking green economy, but we're positioning a transition to circular economy as a means to achieving that. So currently we have 4 programs within the department. These are them here. It's technology, innovation, international cooperation and resources, research, development and support, and socio-economic innovation partnerships. You'll notice when I go through it, there's a lot I have to say about this. That's because I sit in that program. And then within it, these are the chief directorates I've identified that actually contribute already in some form to circular economy initiatives. So starting with technology innovation, which we call Program 2, we've got the Hydrogen and Energy Chief Directorate and the Bio Innovation one. And these are the areas that they cover. I'm just going to give you an example out of each one on the next slide. So you have what we're calling the Bio and Circular Economy Nexus. This is where, if you look at the circular economy as was described before, it's looking at efficient use of your resources. So limiting waste production and maintaining resources within your economy for as long as possible. And the bioeconomy complements this by bringing in more efficient green biological processes into production, such as your biorefineries. Now, biorefinery is very much, it's similar to a petroleum refinery, but the feedstock is different. You don't use oil, you use biomass. And you can produce very much similar chemical compounds out of that process as you do of petroleum or from oil. It explains it there as well. This is just an example of in the energy space. So we know if we're shifting to renewables, one of the constraints is batteries. That not only the cost of batteries, the size of batteries, the efficiency of the batteries. So here's a program that the DSI is investing into, is looking into battery technology development. And lithium-ion batteries are still a popular storage medium, and you find them in your phones, your iPads, etc. And we expect, well, the signs are evident, usage of these are going to increase in the future, there's no doubt. Now, the lifespan of these batteries is somewhere between 3 to 5 years. So that shows us that in the coming 10 years, we're going to have a very large waste stream of batteries to deal with. So at the moment, globally, it's estimated roughly 5% of these batteries are recycled, and the remainder are uncollected or stockpiled or even dumped in landfills. It's very unsustainable to continue in this way. These batteries have a tendency to also ignite if left exposed. And besides that part of it, you've got corrosion, which then leaches heavy metals into your groundwater as well, another potential thing that can go wrong. And South Africa is obviously following the global trends. Now, one of the parts that's important for this discussion is Mintech. We're looking at the battery recycling and recovery of materials. Now, this is where 2 parts of our department actually came together. Under the Waste RDI roadmap, we did some work to look at the e-waste landscape in the country. And what happens in South Africa now is because the volumes are still small, we're exporting most of that to Europe for processing. And Mintech have seen an opportunity here. As I said, in 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a lot of the stuff in the system. So they're seeing an opportunity and are starting to work on how do we actually derive benefit and process it in country. Because you can get the lithium out, which is something we don't have in South Africa, copper, nickel, cobalt, and there's increasing demand. As we know, rare earth metals in particular, the market is captured by the Chinese. So anything we can do to keep some of that in our economy for a bit is useful. Then we also have an aspect of our department where we work quite extensively with international partners, and they're all listed here. I'm going to focus on the one on SATREPS, the beneficiation of algae. The others is interesting. The Transboundary Big Data Project is an interesting one. We're looking at how we can utilize big data between countries who share aquifers to manage the resource more efficiently on both sides of the border. Now, how this project works is you've got an algal raceway that's used as a polishing step after wastewater treatment. So before you discharge the water from the wastewater plant, you send it through here to recover as much of the nutrients by the algae as possible, because you can't just let the nitrates and the phosphates go out into the streams. So that was where this project started, and DUT are experts at the production of microalgae that produces large amounts of oils, and the oils are what you need for biofuel production. And that's, so eThekwini Water and Sanitation actually provide them with a space. So they've built a raceway. This one that's up here is actually on the top of their building at the university, but they have a real live one on a wastewater works to produce something, I think in the region, they can produce around 10 tons of algae in that raceway. And eThekwini is a partner on this project. And then there's a partnership with Japan. So Nagoya University in Japan have technology that optimize the efficiency of extraction of the oils. Like I said, the oil is what you take to biofuel. And Tokyo University of Agriculture has what they call the AgriMatt technology. So once you've extracted the oil from the algae, the residue that's left behind is still rich in nitrates and phosphates. And we don't want to lose that. So the AgriMatt technology, actually it's something where they take the plant material and they weave it together. And these mats act as a slow-release fertilizer bed that you can insert into impacted soils. And the ARC in South Africa is the other partner who are testing the AgriMatts in our in our systems. And this is circular economy in action. So we're treating wastewater, which was why the algal raceway was put there. But now we found we can produce the biofuel and a fertilizer from all the materials. So your spent materials are minimized significantly. We also have science missions, and there we've got a global change research program. And under that program, a host of things are done, which contribute in some significant way towards circular economy. And for many years, we focus on the biophysical aspects of climate change. And recently, we've now shifted that focus slightly and brought in the social aspects of climate change as well. So how is it affecting livelihoods and people as well, not just the biophysical? So I'm not giving a direct example here because it's fundamental research, not applied research that's being done. And then we come to the part where I sit, and I sit over in sector innovation and the green economy. And here we've got a host of programs. I've mentioned the water roadmap. the waste roadmap, but we also have a water roadmap and an ICT roadmap. Now, why I'm mentioning those two in particular is whenever we're talking circular economy, we tend to focus what we're talking on waste. And my perspective of circular economy is it's not a waste thing. It's a philosophy of how you do business and a philosophy of how you do manufacturing. For instance, if you're going to design a new product, you design it for end-of-life purposes. So you don't design it to be thrown away. So you start thinking about it at that stage already. And water is an important economic factor as well that has to be considered. In South Africa, as the 39th driest country on the planet, which a lot of people tend to ignore. And if you look at our water use patterns, you'd swear we live in a country where it rains every day like England. We don't have the luxury to flush with 6 liters of water, for example, but we do so anyway. And what happened in Cape Town is a stark case in point, and many of us have already forgotten what's happened in Cape Town. And it's coming again. I recently read something where they're saying day zero is coming to Gauteng if we don't change our behavior within the next year. So the drought cycles are getting shorter, and we have to contend with that and understand that. You cannot save what you do not have. So you've got to save in the time of plenty. So conserve what you have. So water reuse particularly is a circular concept. ICT, 4IR, it's extremely hard to transition to a circular economy if you do not know the data and the information. It's paramount to the transition. So there's another intersection that we can't lose. Biorefineries, I keep coming back to it because for me it's such a beautiful example of how this works. So in our department, we've had different branches of the department, 3 directorates all coming together to work on this particular topic and to fund it, because that's how important we see it within the circular space. We've established at the CSR, the Biorefinery Industrial Development Facility, and that's to interface with industry a lot closer as well. And through that program, we're also trying to build an SMME base within this emerging space in the country. But if you look at some of the stuff it lends itself to is sugar. Sugar is a declining industry sector in the country. It's not just because of sugar tax. So they're looking actively for alternatives to just going from sugarcane to sugar. And there's a lot of work looking at chemical production like furfural, for example. And under the waste roadmap, we funded some work looking at waste feathers from chickens. There's something like 200,000 tons of the stuff produced in this country every year. And what we've done is looked at the extraction of keratin. Keratin's the same stuff you find in hair and nails. And looking at the extraction of that, because there is an economic value to that product in the market. Now, the approach we followed is we commissioned the Green Cape down in Cape Town to do some work for us, looking at a needs assessment of whether or not, as a department, we have a role to play in the transition to a circular economy. How am I doing for time, by the way? Okay. So what we wanted to understand is what do we know and what do we need to know? And then who can help us to get the answers we require? And this is just a schematic of what we did. And we have quite a lot of information in the country. We're doing a lot of things that lend itself to the transition, but we're not calling it a circular economy. It's sitting under different guises, industrial symbiosis, all those words I put up in the beginning. So after the needs assessment, and I'll give you some of the outcomes, then looking at approaching a circular economy framework with an STI lens. Now, it's very important I say that because the lead department on circular economy in South Africa is the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. And we're looking to support them through using STI approaches for the evidence base that we require to actually do the transition. So how do we support a knowledge-based transition to circular economy? And this is what the needs assessment came up with. There's a few key questions we have to ask ourselves, and this is to be the way we're looking at it. As I said, we want to develop STI sector plans. Is you apply these questions onto every sector, so it doesn't sit alone. So you can see what does the transition mean to our development trajectory in this country? What sectors are most favorable and which are least? And interestingly enough, for people who think that mining sits somehow outside of this, Anglo-American are going around the world and holding workshops with their people to understand what this means for them. So mining companies are also on board in this quest. But also we need to look at the value chains, both and as well as supply chain opportunities that exist. And that talks to public procurement. The transition to a circular economy, most people agree, will happen through concerted efforts by governments through their procurement. They're normally the biggest buyer in the system. But there's also things like regulations. If you're going to shift, we need to be talking to DMRE, we need to be talking to water affairs, environmental affairs. All the regulatory departments have a role to play as well, but we need the evidence to understand what regulations are there that need to be changed. So we need a lot of work to be done up front first. Change management. This morning you heard the story about the company where the board wouldn't do a simple thing like efficiency of energy use. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done because some of these things, as you saw from the colleague in Ghana, some of the things are not rocket science to implement. It's fairly simple stuff that can be done. But there are mindset changes that have to happen in that process too, and people have to change the way they've been working all along. And then what research and development and innovation efforts are required to support the uptake within any sector? We need to know we need the evidence, we need to understand if sugar is shifting from sugar production to furfural production, what does that mean to their processes? What does it mean to their people? Who do they need to upskill? Who do they need to reskill? Etc. There's a lot to be done, and that fear of jobs being lost has to be addressed at the same time. It's an easy one, and it's an easy one, and business and labor always come forward and say, but we're going to lose X number of jobs. They don't talk about the jobs that will be created in this new economic paradigm. And we have to think about that. We have to try to balance how we do it. Also, like I said, it's collaborative. So already departments are coming together to talk about this. We're working with, unfortunate name, we're working with Dev currently to see if we can come up with a common position, and we're pulling the DTI into the conversation as well for the country as to what evidence requirements are to be sought. Because our department's mandate is purely STI. So we support our sister departments in that way. It also looks at alignment of key features of this paradigm rather than trying to get hung up and argue about what the definition is, because we can do that till the cows come home. But there's certain things that that need to be done to make it happen, and we need to focus our attention on what those things are. I speak a lot here on about government departments. It's not only about us. We've seen in terms of single-use the plastics, how civil society can come forward and put pressure on people to make change. And the people I'm talking about is not just the government departments, but the owners of the brands, the private sector. You can change their behavior as well. So it's a collective grouping of people to help us to get there. Applied RDI is critical in this transition, as we have to have the collaboration from industry, government, industry associations as well. And also looking at long-term infrastructure plans. So you've heard a lot about, in the water sector, we're talking about infrastructure, and the billions and billions of rands required to fix the infrastructure, and that's around the world, not just here. It lends itself also to this transition because you can build better systems. You can build systems that talk to each other, like the Internet of Things can be embedded within your new infrastructure to give you valuable data. The age of a pipe, how, you know, when you need to replace it, and then you can recycle the contents of said pipe into something else, for instance. I've already said the next point. But as I said, it has to be a partnership. It has to happen as a collaborative effort, and it has to happen as a country between all the players. Government alone is not going to make this happen. As much as we can write the policies, and they can make very nice doorstops, the size of them sometimes, we need to implement what we come up with. And to implement, you need to co-create the solution you're putting in front of people. Just briefly, I just wanted to mention there's also the Horizon 2020. This is more on the research side of things. There you can see some dates to take note of. There's some money that you potentially can unlock for research into the space. And it's a program that focuses on European needs and global challenges. But South Africa is one of the successful partners on this program with the EU for many years. And so this particular work program highlighted here is also contributing to building a low-carbon, climate-resilient future, which is in our NDP, Chapter 5. So it aligns quite neatly with that. And you can see there are a number of areas in which we have something to gain from, not just learning, but you become part of a global network of people working on similar topics. And as I said, as a country, we participate very successfully in this program. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.